Hello YouTube, welcome back. This is Baylor Mage again, and today we're bringing you one of my all-time favorite builds, but that is also still somewhat of a meme. This is the Death's Oath Occultist. Now, this has been one of my favorite builds for a while. This league, it got a pretty substantial buff, like 25% more base damage. I do want to say right off the bat, no matter how much money you put into this, you're probably not taking this to Ubers. This can kill any map bosses. You can do tier 17s and whatnot, and you can do most Atlas strategies that revolve around clear speed. But you won't do things like Titanic Rogue Exiles and those sort of strats where you need like super high single target. When we're never ever getting super high single target. But basically how this thing works is Death's Oath is just a massive AoE aura that takes up about 3/4 of the screen and just does persistent chaos damage over time to everything in it with no visual effect. We use that plus the Occultist pop explodes to clear everything. We're using the forbidden flesh and flames of the all damage can ignite elementalist node to make it so that all of those chaos pops ignite. We then prolift those ignites. We're using black flame to make those ignites also do chaos damage over time. Basically, it's like my ultimate clear speed build. I have to say, we'll jump into the game and we'll show you the path of building and the gear and everything, but I do have to say, as far as like quote unquote power per currency investment, this has always been relatively low return. This is the kind of build that you play because it's fun and you just want a walking simulator where you barely press anything and you auto bomb everything and you just speed clear maps. It isn't like good on like a power to currency ratio. So let's jump in game. All right, so here we are. Now, these are some important notes from last league. The base damage of Death's Oath being increased from 1000 base to 1250 base. Let me take one of two options. One, I can have the same amount of damage I always had before when I was running a bow with caustic arrow, or and gain, you know, Svalin and proper defenses, or I could go the same normal bow setup and do even more damage. I opted for, I don't need to kill Ubers or super difficult map strats like Titanic Exiles or Meat Sacks or anything that like requires, you know, 40, 50, 60, 100 million DPS. I don't need to be doing any of that stuff. There's plenty of things for me to do on a much lower radius. I would rather be tanky. So what I did was I went with the Svalin setup. So, real important, I jumped straight into a high budget version. What I am going to do is link below. Exiled Cat on YouTube did a 0 to hero of this recently. This is basically my logical progression of like, hey, if I was to dump a buttload more currency into it, what would that look like? And so I'm basically playing that. You do not need this level of budget. I will link to his 0 to hero videos in the description so you can see how to make this thing on less of a budget. I will not be covering those budget versions. But, all right, so that we understand it, Death's Oath has a few problems with damage scaling. One, it's not a spell. That's the biggest problem. It is not a spell. So it doesn't benefit from spell damage, which means there's only actually a few ways to scale it. Chaos damage, damage over time, chaos damage over time, damage over time multi, chaos damage over time multi, and generic increase damage, as well as minion damage if you take spiritual aid, which I have. The one remaining thing that tends to get overlooked a little bit too often is increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills, because it is technically an aura. So I've decided to go the super tanky way, and you will notice I have 3 clusters. These clusters are relatively cheap. At least these 2 are very cheap. These are just normal 8 passive clusters. Those are practically free. We love them. We love the skill effect duration. That's really important. I'll explain why in a minute. But we love having the spirit effect, the skill effect duration there. I have 1 medium for just recovery. This just gives me a bunch of recovery when I'm running through a map. This is map mod immune. I have not read a map mod so far. Scream through everything. The recovery is part of that map mod immunity, right? I do have myself a double Watcher's Eye, which is really nice. You do not need a double, but I would go for the damage over time multi with Malevolence, just at least on its own. Very nice. I have the single best Glorious Vanity Jewel that I could get for this spot, which is again, just these 2 nodes, just like my last build, except they are both increased effect of non-curse auras and increase AoE for auras. Increasing AoE for auras is massive because, as we said, Death's Oath is an aura, which also means Beacon of Hope is my anoint for another 80% area. We also have 20% or 10% generic area just there. That does lead, you can see the Flesh and Stone. Its area is absolutely massive. And to just quickly demonstrate what kind of area you're looking at for this, let us get rid of our Merc and just walk in real slowly so you can see how far away these things start taking damage. So we're looking at not quite the entire screen. Mine only goes to about there-ish, which is still pretty good, especially since we're going to have the explosion and then the prolif of the ignite. Past that, it's quite rangy. All right. Other things we've done in this build that are like somewhat important, right? We have our Forbidden set, which I put somewhere. Ah, here they are. We have our Forbidden set, Shaper of Flame. Now, Shaper of Flame makes it so that all damage can ignite, which is absolutely fantastic. It also makes it significantly tankier by having that 40% conversion, but all damage can ignite. So now my Occultist pops Ignite, right? Then we have Black Flame, which is probably the most useful because it makes my ignites purple. You could just skip this part and just have normal ignites, and that would be fine. Just put a different ring in. But we have the ignite spread as an implicit on my glove, and then enemies take ignite as chaos damage. So it's all about clear. It's all about clear everywhere. So defensively, I went for my favorite setup, which is to have a little bit of ward and some max Svalin block. So I ended up with 90 and 90 on my block chance, which is insane. We do only have a 23k max hit here. I'm not positive that that's true. And the reason for that is when I take this one off, nothing really changes. And that should be having 40% of physical converted to fire. So in order to fix that, this comes from the Combs belt. So in order to fix that, I've just changed this to 65. I don't know if this is the right solution to this, but we're missing 40%. It doesn't show up. So 25% on my Merc's belt, 40% from the Ascendancy. So it gives me a 33k max hit. Quite nice. Really good. We do have a pretty decent amount of evasion as well, which is quite funny because that's coming from our Merc. Other things we did that are important. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, I needed one of these. I needed one of these to cap, and unfortunately, I had to do these the wrong way around. Now, in a perfect world, I would like my Unnatural Instinct to be on this side, and my Light of the Meaning with Chaos damage to be on this side. That's just better, because then we don't take this skill effect duration wheel, we take this skill effect duration wheel here instead. That would be much better because this unnatural also takes these 5% reduced nodes, and we would prefer to not do that. But I needed to include all of these block nodes to get block capped. That's really, really good. Now, last thing about this build that's somewhat important right here. Socketed gems are supported by level 33 decay. It is worth noting that focused channeling is not important. You do not need to get focused channeling. You need to get something that doesn't brick it. But this is real interesting because it does some weird stuff. This is where all of our single target comes from, and we cannot tell you how much single target we have. Death's Oath itself is a 500,000 DPS aura. That is not huge. That's actually not even enough to comfortably kill bosses or breach lords or tier 17s or anything I have been killing. So all of our single target actually comes from this helmet, which is a storm burst that I accidentally over leveled. I should have left it at level 1, but I didn't. Don't worry about that. Pretend it's level 1. It's a avenue for applying decay. Decay scales its damage really disgustingly high with levels. It's like 4 or 5 times as strong at level 33 as it would be at level 20 if we were to use it with our own support gem. It's amazing. But what decay does is just an 8-second damage over time dot. Now the problem with that is we don't want to take 8 seconds to kill everything. The real important bit here is Storm Burst itself. Exploding orbs deal 75% of the skill's damage for each 0.4 seconds of remaining duration. Now, I'm not 100% sure on exactly how this functions, but essentially what it leads to is the more duration you have left, the more damage your decay does by a significant margin. Like a very huge, like taking this or not taking this is the difference between what I felt like was about 6 million DPS and then what I felt like was about 11 or 12 million DPS, which is what it feels like I'm doing now. And that's just from this wheel, which means all of our supports are about increasing the duration. So you want quality, quality gives it more base duration. Then we've got more duration support, and then we've got enhance because quality gives it more duration. And then in the world's most perfect world, this would be efficacy instead of life tap. Efficacy is actually more damage than life tap, but I started running just 8 mod corrupteds and a bunch of risk scarabs and all sorts of things. And when I got you couldn't regen, I ran out of mana and it became an annoyance. So I swapped it for life tap. So now I just don't have to worry about that. All right. So that's all of that explaining. When you go to buy a Forbidden Shaco, if you do this, do not worry about the focused channeling support. It's a bonus. Just get the decay and something that doesn't brick it. So you can't like have supported by level 2 brutality, for instance, because that would make the skill not do any damage. That would stop decay from working. That's bad. The other thing you need to know is this is our single target skill. If you do this, you will do very little damage. We've got a ton of duration and it looks cool, but we've actually used the duration with this. So what we actually want to do the most amount of damage is spawn, if we can, 1 ball. The perfect one would be spawning 1 ball long enough for it to explode. That would do the most amount of damage. So you don't want to do it too short. If you do it too short like that, you don't get an explosion. No good. If you do it too long like this, every extra ball will lower your single target damage. So you actually just want to perfectly get 1 or 2 balls at most, and then you can just move, run around, stand there because you're tanky. Doesn't matter. You just want to do it like that. Get that 1 explodey ball. That'll be the most amount of damage you can do. Any channeling for longer is actually worse, although it does look fucking cool. All right. Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you how much damage this thing does. My best guess is 10 to 12 million. More than enough to do all of your mapping things, more than enough to do tier 17 mapping, not enough to go do the most juiced single target component or Ubers. Otherwise, reasonably tanky. Everything's great. I absolutely love this. Is it, look, worth the investment? The answer is no. You play this sort of thing because it's very, very fun, not because it's very, very good. And the last look I will leave in the notes is what merc I use for this. Infamous Blade Biter is our merc. Grace is a bonus. You do not need it. You do want Malevolence. The reason we want this guy is because for about 100 alterations each, you can roll 2 weapons that will have, if I bothered to divine them, up to 40% Malevolence aura effect. So between those and the aura effect I'm getting from this thing, which is just my old leftover amulet, you don't need to get this one. You could put on a Jinx Juju and get basically the same amount of aura effect. I already had this, so I just threw it on. I've got aura effect here again. This is actually my old ring and belt, so they have Zealotry aura effect on them instead of Malevolence. But even with what I've got here, that is 140% increased effect of Malevolence, which is massive. I have already put those in the configuration with 40% increased effect of Grace and 118 that I've got effect of Malevolence. And I put the Merc's skills here. Obviously, we don't use both of those. We do have some mana available, but I'm ticking them to get them back on. They are level 26 auras with that amount of percent increased. And that's where it leaves us. That is all. This has been a really fun build. I'm probably still going back to Holy Relic because nothing is quite as strong as that. I will see everybody next time. Bye-bye.